Barack Obama said during his State of the Union address just this past January, he called on Congress to eliminate $4 billion a year in tax breaks for big oil. And the response on Capitol Hill, according to Dan Froomkin, who is the senior Washington correspondent for the Huffington Post, that called it a knowing chuckle. And Dan Froomkin joins us now on the program. Dan, thanks for coming on.
Hey, Ben. It's great to be here.
So why was there a knowing chuckle when Barack Obama called for an end to the subsidies for big oil, when it's hard to imagine that you could find 10 people in this country who don't work in big oil or don't lobby for big oil, who would
or don't get money from big oil.
Right, who don't get money from big oil, who would think that this is a good subsidy to continue?
Yeah, well, no, your question makes me chuckle knowingly. The reality is that, even though everybody is looking to reduce deficits and find what have you, it's completely a dead letter in Congress. I mean, even the people who you would think would be optimistic about at least discussing this say there's just no way. And the reason, of course, is because of the incredible clout of the oil and gas industry. I've shifted beats recently, and I'm now covering sort of the influence of money on politics, and I felt like I had to start with this one because it's just one of the most obvious things. If they're the government having money troubles, and God knows we're about to shut down the government, and there is $4 to $8 billion a year really in tax credits that the American taxpayers are just handing over to the biggest, richest corporations in the history of the world.
What are the numbers? What are the polling numbers suggest about support for tax subsidies for big oil?
Yeah, well, the MSNBC and the Wall Street Journal did a poll last month where they basically said, look, if you're talking about reducing the deficit, which of these things are acceptable to you? And 74% of Americans said that it was perfectly acceptable for them to eliminate the tax credits for big oil companies. Mind you, there were some other things that were even more popular, including taxing the rich, but let's not go there, huh? Now, the American Petroleum Institute, which is the powerhouse, the number one lobbyist, for the oil and gas industry, has its own polls in which they ask people, so do you want taxes to be raised on oil companies? And on those polls, most people say no, but it's just really a question of how you explain what's going on here. And what's going on here is that these people are getting an enormous gift from the taxpayers every year.
Let's discuss a little bit. I mentioned it before the break, but tell me how much money these big oil companies are making.
How much money they're making?
Yeah.
Well, one estimate I quoted here was that they've made $1 trillion profit in the last decade. And just last year, Exxon posted $33 billion in profit, just itself. I mean, this is larger than the budget of most countries, and that was down from the year before. So I mean, the amounts are absolutely incredible, and so they're also spending an enormous amount of money in Washington on lobbying and on campaign donations, but it is such a tiny fraction of the profits they're making, and also, frankly, a pretty tiny fraction of the return they're getting on their investment.
There's the head of the American Petroleum Institute, I believe that's who it was, when he sort of spoke. What's the event that he spoke at? That's, by the way, sounds like Earth's worst event, like the big energy summit. Right?
It was the State of American Energy speech, which comes around the time of the State of the Union speech, over at the National Press Club.
Yeah, it's Jack Gerard is the head of the API, the State of American Energy speech. God, I would just hate to be there. And Fred Upton sitting in the front row. Who's Fred Upton?
Fred Upton is the new chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and quite an interesting character because he actually, I didn't get into this in the story that I wrote, but he actually, a long time ago, had a fairly reasonable environmental conservation record. But he has now become absolutely the point man in sort of the most radical moves on the Hill, including the attempt to defund the EPA and the attempt to restrict the EPA from doing what it's supposed to be doing, which is regulating greenhouse gases.
And what do guys like Fred Upton and Joe Barton from Texas, what possible argument do they make for maintaining these enormous $4 to $8 billion in subsidies?
Well, they argue exactly what what the oil and gas industry argues, which is that this would be a tax increase, and that this would kill jobs, and then also that would raise oil price, that would raise gas prices. So but you take them one by one, and they make no sense. It's a tax increase. Well, as one congressman I spoke to said, if that's a tax increase, then cutting food stamps is a tax increase on the people who get food stamps. I mean, it's a tax increase only in the sense that you're no longer giving them this huge gift in the form of a tax credit.
But isn't there obviously a very reasonable argument that if you take away these subsidies, then it's a tax decrease for the rest of us? I mean, giving them the subsidies is a tax increase on you, and it's a tax increase on me.
It's a zero-sum game, exactly. And then the most amazing thing, though, is when you look at these the actual credits that are involved. Two of them date back almost 100 years.
Yeah, this is actually my favorite part of the story. Explain this.
Yeah, I mean, one of them dates back 100 years, the other one like 75 years or something. And they both, go back to when the oil industry was a fairly young, untested industry. And one of the credits, this is just amazing, is specifically to make up for the fact that there were so many dry holes, back 100 years ago when they were drilling for oil. And so it was this special little sweetheart deal they gave to the oil companies to basically help mitigate the risk of dry holes. When's the last time you heard of a dry hole? I mean, with the science they've got right now, I mean, so it's completely anachronistic.
So, and back when the oil companies had some risk involved in their business, I mean, it makes some sense to give a tax break, and you're giving it to a company and urging them to sort of invest and continue to sort of do their work and to continue to grow. That's the idea of a tax break.
That's the idea. You're right. You subsidize industry in their early stages to help them make sure they have a market and help them overcome the risks they face. Exactly. And so there's a very potent argument for us doing precisely that for the new green energy initiatives, the renewables. But to be continuing to give this to big oil, and especially now at $107 a barrel for oil, these guys are making the biggest killing in the history of world finance.
So two questions related to that. One, and I know this is a point that Earl Blumenauer from Oregon, who has co-authored the House bill that, as you point out, resembles what the president said in the State of the Union, that we should get rid of these subsidies for big oil. And he admits, yeah, my bill's going nowhere. But he points out that we should take these subsidies that are given to big oil and these 75 or 100-year-old subsidies, and fine, you want to keep them as tax breaks, then we should invest, as you mentioned, in companies that actually need this sort of tax subsidy.
Yeah, and that's what Obama was proposing to do in the State of the Union address as well. He talked about these spending more money on renewables, and then he said, and it would come from repealing this tax break. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen. And in fact, it's that pairing up in particular that seems to really upset the oil industry.
Then the other thing, you mentioned the $107 a barrel. How on earth does this $4 to $8 billion in tax in subsidies, how would getting rid of that possibly affect the price of gasoline?
It wouldn't. I mean, what it would do, there would be one effect of this, and that would be that the bottom line for these companies would be reduced by that amount of money, and so the shareholders and the CEOs and what have you would all be seeing a $4 billion drop in that profit. But the unfortunate fact for all of us is that oil prices have nothing to do with the actual cost of getting that oil. They're a function of this completely hyped up global marketplace where every time there's a geopolitical issue or the prices shoot up, and in fact arguably they're $20-$30 higher they should be just based on speculation, on the fact that speculators are driving up the price. So the $4 billion in reduced subsidies to the U.S. based oil companies would be negligible in this. It's like a $3 trillion a year market. $4 billion is it's a lot to you and me.
Yeah, I mean, right, exactly. It's a lot to you and me, but it really is. It's nothing when we're talking about these numbers. We don't have a lot of time yet left, so I want to get to the money. We're talking about money, but this is, of course, all about the money and how much the API spends. How much money do these guys spend on lobbying, and how many lobbyists do they have, and who do they give the money to?
Yeah, well, they spent, an astonishing $145 million in lobbying last year, which is, I figured this out, it's about the equivalent to the total budget of 100 congressional offices. So imagine what you're looking at there. And of that, what that $147 million bought them was 788 individual lobbyists, so considerably more than one per congressman.
So they spent $145 million, more than 100 offices, and they have 788 lobbyists all by themselves?
Yeah, I mean, the various different companies. It's not the American Petroleum Institute alone. It's all the different companies, all the different oil and gas interests that collectively have given that much. This OpenSecrets.org website is an amazing trove of data for this stuff. If anybody wants to dig deeper, it's
and which side are they giving the money to? I know this answer, but actually there's a depressing part of this also. But who are they giving the money to?
What's fascinating is it used to be that they didn't give nearly as much money, and that it was not exactly evenly split between Republicans and Democrats, but not totally out of sync. It was back in the 90s. It was like for every dollar they gave Democrats, they gave Republicans $1.78 or something. But now. And starting really around the time that Al Gore was the leader of the Democratic Party, that completely shifted, and now it's like almost a 3 or 4 to 1 ratio. I think it's like $3.40 or something, which they spend for each dollar that they get on Republicans, which they spend, compared to what they spend on Democrats. So it's completely out of line. And basically, not surprisingly, what you're seeing is a Republican Party that is basically in lockstep with the oil and gas industry. Their rhetoric on tax increases and on drilling is basically identical to the oil and gas industry.
But when Democrats controlled the House, obviously the first 2 years of the Obama administration, and controlled the Senate, there was one Democrat who played a significant role in preventing anything from happening in the Senate regarding removing these subsidies.
Yeah, and then that's Mary Landrieu from Louisiana. But in general, there is this. There've always been enough Democrats to make it hard. They call them the oil patch Democrats, and and so back in 2007, when there was a really strong attempt in the House to roll back these subsidies, it failed in the Senate precisely because of them.
So what's it going to take? Because the Tea Party is going to actually stand with progressives on this. There's no way that they want this kind of money spent on tax subsidies for big oil, I imagine. I don't have a lot of friends in the Tea Party.
Well, thus far, they have not. They have gotten all worked up about ethanol subsidies, but I have yet to find a Tea Partier who is actually willing to cross big oil. Go figure.
Well, all right, well, that may be. But nonetheless, I can't. They make so much money. I can't, to me, understand why this is so important. I guess I just simply don't understand how important the bottom line is, even when it's so incredibly successful. But it is unpopular. It's a political loser if it sort of is driven into the minds of, if it's made a significant, if it becomes part of the public discourse on a significant basis. It strikes me as a political loser. But there has to be somebody fighting that fight and standing up to API. How does that happen, or is it just a lost cause until the end of time?
Well, I mean, what the oil and gas industry is counting on is that not only is it a lost cause, but everybody feels it's a lost cause and doesn't even try to take it up. I felt like somebody ought to write about it, so I did. There are a few members of Congress who are worked up about it, but no, the fact is that the industry's clout is so strong that it's, as I put in the beginning of my article, it's not just that they win legislative fights; they prevent them from happening in the first place because people think it's just not even worth it.
Last question I want to ask you, and it was almost my the most depressing thing in the piece, is when you're talking about the lobbying efforts of big oil and those 788 lobbyists and $147 million spent, and then you pointed out that they're the 5th biggest trade, and so they're. I was like, holy crap, there are 4 groups that lobby more, and they're all incredibly powerful and evil. Who are, do you remember the 4 biggest?
Well, not surprisingly, Big Pharma is number 1.
Yeah.
But I actually was a bit surprised to realize that electric utilities were number 2. So I've got to look at that and figure out what they're getting for their money. Number 3 and 4 are business associations, basically the Chamber of Commerce, essentially all by itself is number 3, and the insurance industry.
Well, at least those top 5 groups are all looking out for consumers. So I just when Republicans complain about sort of that Democrats and public interest groups are sort of taking over our government, it's insane, and there ought to be a constant reminder of
this is Exhibit A.
Yeah, of the top 5 groups that are influencing Congress.
Mm-hmm.
It's frickin' insane. And the key, by the way, it's great that you're writing about it. It's great everything that you write about it. But this needs to be taken up on television, of course, on a regular basis. Dan Froomkin, senior Washington correspondent for the Huffington Post. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Ben.